Pastor Derrick is coming this morning. The reason I really appreciate Pastor Derrick is most of you know that he is our youth pastor. And although he's getting close to 50 years old now, is it 50? No? Okay, well, he's over 40 anyway. And still able to connect with kids in such a powerful way and really minister on their level, and yet has a deep relationship with the Lord. So don't be fooled by Pastor Derrick's antics. He really has a deep relationship with the Lord that I hope you see today. So let's welcome Pastor Derrick as he comes this morning.
Good morning. I can tell I'm not Pastor Tom because my podium's not here. Thank you. You okay? Need help getting down the stairs? Oh, yeah. It is always a privilege and an honor to be able to speak before you. Thankful that Pastor Tom for giving me the opportunity. People always ask, so are you really nervous? You know, I'm really nervous before you get up here. It's just the waiting. I just can't stand it. You just get me up there. Brian, hurry up, play fast, get done, finish the announcements. Again, just want to say thank you to all the moms that are here today. I think it's fair to say without moms, none of us would be here. So thank you. Thank you for your part in all of us being here. All right, this morning I'm going to speak the message called Created to Finish Life, Purpose, and Destiny. And the idea is that we are all created by God for a reason. That there's no mistake, and that there is a plan that we have, and that He has designed it for us, for now, in this time, for a specific reason, and your day-to-day adventure is leading you towards your destiny. I don't know about some of you, but sometimes the day-to-day stuff, you just think, why am I doing this? Isn't there something bigger? But this morning, I want you to realize and understand that our day-to-day stuff is our purpose, and that is projecting us to our destination and what God has designed us to do. I'll say this as well. It doesn't matter where you've been or what you've done or even what you've thought about your future or if you've given up on that. God has created you and He created me for a purpose and for a plan, and we have a destiny to fulfill. And if we will put our trust in God, if we'll rely on Him and put our focus and our attention on Him, He'll make sure that we fulfill what He created us to do. Now, I know in our church, every week, a church this size, we have people that have known Jesus, have a committed relationship with Him for a long time. There are people that are brand new in their walk and their relationship with Him. And there are people here this morning, you are here this morning, and you're not quite there yet. And we want to just say, welcome, all of you, because that's what we're here for. That's what church is about. It's about being together as family, walking this journey together in relationship and growing together. Just because we've known and been in a relationship with God for 10, 20, 30 years doesn't mean we don't need help and we don't need to grow. We do need to grow. And we need to be together and we need to learn from one another. So if you're here this morning, you're in the right place at the right time for a specific reason. And we just want to welcome everyone here. Part of what I want to share this morning has to do with me personally. Just a very short, small glimpse. When I was born, which was a few years ago, not quite 50, thank you, Mr. Greg. Everything would seem normal. Delivery was fine. I was healthy and cute. That hasn't changed. We're just bouncing baby boy, brought in the nursery, all that good stuff. The one difference would be that I didn't leave the hospital with the woman who gave birth to me. I had a biological mom, but that's not the person that I left the hospital with. And so you could say I have two moms. Isn't all bad? Maybe. One woman I have never met before. But she decided to take on the challenge and go through the pregnancy and the process, and patiently carried me for 9 months in her body, knowing that adoption was at the end. That is not an easy decision, but a big decision, and a decision that I respect a lot. That's my biological mom. The other lady is the one who decided to take on the challenge, and I do mean challenge, along with her husband, of raising, teaching, and training me, and giving me a name and a heritage and a life and a family, and the one that I have the honor of calling Mom and Dad. Now, she's not here this morning, so I can say whatever I want. She will be here this second service, though, so I have to be careful. Growing up, it didn't bother me at all that I was adopted. We found out at a very young age that my brother and I were both adopted. It didn't bother me. I didn't think about it. I just thought, hey, it was special. That's kind of cool. I grew up in a Christian home. I thought, well, that's all right. Whatever. I'm special. You're not. And just figured it was just part of the process. But since then, and growing up, and you meet a lot of people who are adopted, and again, in a church this size, I know that I'm not the only one. There are several of us. And everyone goes through different emotions and different thoughts and processes through that whole thing. I just didn't think about it much. I grew up, once in a while I would think, I wonder where my mom and dad are. I wonder what they're doing. I wonder if they're still alive. And then it would just quickly pass, and I'd be doing what I was doing. And that's where it just kind of stopped. I just thought about it. Now, my brother is adopted, and he had more feelings of where are they at, why, and all this other stuff. And those are perfectly normal. But I just didn't have those feelings. I figured that God had a plan. God wasn't in heaven when I was born and saw this whole thing take place and go, uh-oh, I didn't see that coming. Jesus, we need to have a little meeting. We need to go to plan B. This isn't working out the way we had planned. No, from the beginning, God knew and had a plan and a purpose. I wasn't plan B. His plan for me was thought of before I was born, and his plan for you was well prepared before you ever thought of by your parents. Let's look at Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. It says this, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." Look at that again. We are God's handiwork. You and I are his handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. That's pretty awesome when you think of it. And I know that's something that some of us have heard before. But you see, we were created to do good things by a creator who thought of it before we were ever thought of. Well before we were born. He didn't come up with the idea after we had grown up and after we'd gotten our lives together and after we've gotten it right. He thought about it before. And he planned it all out. And he gave us a purpose. In Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5, it says this, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." Now, I know he's talking to Jeremiah at this time. God is speaking directly to Jeremiah, but he's talking to me as well. And he's talking to you. And listen to what he says in that. He chose you. He formed you. He set you apart. And he appointed you before you were born. God, the creator of all things, the creator of heaven and earth and everything that we see and get to experience, thought of you before you were born and gave you a purpose and a destiny. He gave you the life that you have now. And sometimes that doesn't make sense. And sometimes the things that we go through just don't seem to fall into the right places. But before we were born, God created you for a destiny. In the day-to-day and the thing that we go through on a regular basis are going to propel us to our destiny. He's given you specific things to do that only you can accomplish. And God will take those things, like I said, and he's just gonna take that and he's gonna push. You know, sometimes we make poor decisions. Sometimes we do things that don't line up with what God had intended in the first place because we just want to do our own thing once in a while. We want to do our stuff. But God can take that and he can use that to still affect our destiny and what he has for us. Amen? Don't fall asleep on me. You guys know, a couple weeks ago, Pastor Joel spoke on identity. And he had mentioned what Pastor Brian and Michelle are going to be doing. And if you want to bring up the picture, Pastor Brian and Michelle will be headed with their family to Hungary in just a few short weeks, about 4, to pick up their new girls. Something that they have been praying about and asking God about, adopting some kids, siblings. And this past fall, it all started happening. And these 4 girls are going to be the new Montre girls. What an awesome thing. I've been thinking a lot about this because being adopted and knowing that these kids are going to be dealing with different emotions, wondering why and having all this stuff go through their heads, and yet they're part of a process that God had from the beginning. Brian and Michelle are going to be fulfilling the purpose that God has called them to, and that is to adopt siblings and to raise them up in a godly home and to teach and to train them and to see what God has for their destiny. They'll be fulfilling their purpose, and yet God has a purpose for these 4 girls as well. And they're going to be leaving things that they're accustomed to, and they have questions, and I'm sure there's some fears that are going on in their little minds. But God's over them, and he's got purpose for them. And in that day-to-day and through this whole process, in 10 short weeks, these girls are going to be here in a whole new home with love and excitement and energy. And if you know the Montres at all, man, they are in for a cool ride. But there's going to be a process. And along with that process, they're going to be learning. And in that learning, they're going to be going through their purpose. And that God will be leading them to their destiny. We have no idea what God has in store for these 4 girls, or the Montres for that matter. But God does. It's not something that is surprising at all. It's all part of a plan that God has. I want you to do me a favor this morning. Everybody take a deep breath. Breathe in and just exhale. Please exhale. Now look to your neighbor right and left. Make sure they're still with us. And if you're here this morning, we're able to take a breath, I want to inform you and let you know that you have a purpose. You're here for a reason, and you have a destiny to fulfill. And if you will follow God, if you will take on the challenge and say, okay, God, you know what? I've tried it my way, or I've gone through this, I'm going through that, and I'm just seem to be going through this life. But I'm willing to do it your way, and I'm willing to follow you. And in doing so, you will fulfill the destiny that he has for you. Again, there's a lot of questions. There's a lot of stuff. But if you go through the day-to-day process with purpose in mind, thinking, you know what, there's a purpose in all of this, God will bring you to your destiny. And I like that. So you should say amen. Let's talk about purpose. Some of you here this morning and you are thinking, I really don't think I have a purpose. I don't feel like I have a purpose. And God wants you to know this. You have value because he created you with value and with purpose. Some of you might be thinking, well, I do the same thing day after day. It's mundane. It's the same routine, the same old, and I don't see any way out. And it doesn't seem like there's any purpose in that. But your purpose is always, always temporary. It is always changing. But it is always promoting your destiny and what you're called to do. There are going to be times that you feel like, man, I didn't do anything today that seemed profitable. I woke up and it seems like my day flew by and all of a sudden I'm laying my head back down to sleep. There's going to be days like that. But if we go into our day knowing that we have a purpose and that there's a reason and that it is projecting us to our destination, it gives us hope and challenge. Your purpose is what you're called to do right now, in this moment, in the moment tomorrow, in the situations that you're in, and they will help you towards your future. Most of the time, we don't know in advance what we're going to do. Most of the time, we have no clue. Now, there are times when you figure out very young in life. Hey, this is what I want to do with my life. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to go to school for. This is what I want to be, what I want to become. I want to get married. I want to have this many kids. And we have these ideas, and they don't always turn out that way. Sometimes we know right away what we want to do, and that's what we're going for. But most of the time, we have no idea what our destiny is. We're just doing life, and we're trying to do what's right, and we're trying to make a living. But let me ask this question. What would happen if you did know what your destiny was? What would happen if you did know what's at the end of the line? What would be different? Would you live different? Would you act different? Would you treat people differently? What would you do differently if you knew what your destiny is? What would happen if every day you saw it as your purpose to have some sort of impact on someone's life or serve those around you? Whether you're a stay-at-home mom or dad, or whether you're the president of some company, or you work in fast food, or you're a receptionist, or whatever you do. What if you looked at it with, I have purpose today. There's a reason why I'm here in this place, in this position, at this time. I think that's how it should be every day, even Mondays. You know, one thing I try not to do is go on Facebook on Mondays, because everybody just complains about Monday. I'm like, really? It's going to happen 7 days from now. You're going to say the same thing. It's Monday. You can't wait till Friday. What if Mondays had purpose? Imagine that. Monday with purpose. What if that's how we responded every day? Today, I have purpose. Even in the repetitiveness, doing the same old thing, thinking, I am serving my purpose. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And I don't know what that is, but while you're doing it, you do it to the best of your ability, with all your might. What does the Bible say? As if you're working unto the Lord. What if we did that? How would things change? Because there's some people, and you guys know, you're thinking of them right now. There are people that irritate you on Mondays before your coffee. What would happen if you just say, you know what, there's a purpose and there's a reason behind this? How would it change? I'm not saying that would be easy, but what if we started living that way, on purpose? What would happen? I want to recount a story that many of us know. It's the story of Joseph. And maybe you don't know the biblical and the historical story of Joseph, and maybe you've just seen the musical, the one we had here just a month ago, Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat. But Joseph is a prime example of serving out your purpose and your destiny. So I'll just recap quickly. It comes from Genesis chapter 37 and 39. And here is Joseph is born. He's one of 12 children born to Jacob. And Joseph is Jacob's favorite. And he doesn't hide it. He lets everybody know that Joseph is his favorite. Because he was born to him in his old age, he was born to the woman that he loved with all his heart. And so one day he gave Joseph a coat of many colors. It was colorful and everything. And this started before this, but I'm sure this didn't help the relationship with his brothers. It says his brothers despised him. And it says when he was 17 years old that Joseph had a dream, and he invited his brothers over and said, hey, listen to my dream. This was probably not a good idea, but he did it anyway. We all do dumb things. So he tells his brothers his dream, that they were out in the field gathering their crop, tying up their stalks, and his stalk stood up, and rose up, and theirs stood up as well, but theirs bowed to him. And so the brothers said, are you saying that we're going to bow to you and serve you? And that didn't help the relationship. It says that they despised him greatly. Few years, time frame later, he had another dream. Now you would think that the way they treated him and the way they acted around him, that he would thought, yeah, it's probably not a good idea to tell my brothers the dream. But he calls the brothers and mom and dad in and says, hey, I had another dream. Listen to this. I saw the sun and the moon and the stars and my star, and all of you bowed to me. Awesome. In fact, Jacob said, are you saying that your mother and I and your brothers are going to bow to you? And he rebuked him. This is his favorite son. And he rebuked him, but the next line says this, but he kept it all in his mind. So one day, Joseph is at home for some reason, and all the other brothers are out in the field taking their sheep around, getting them good grass. And he says, go check up on your brothers. And so he does. He goes out there, and he's just probably whistling some tune, thinking about everybody bowing down to him. But his brothers see him coming and say, hey, there's the dreamer. Let's kill him. This is a little bit more than sibling rivalry right here. All right? So they said, let's kill him, and then we'll take his coat, and we'll rip it up, and we'll dip it in blood, and we'll send it back to Dad, say that some animal killed him. There's some hatred going on. One of the brothers steps in and says, hey, let's not kill him. Let's just throw him in this pit, and we'll scare him a little bit, and we'll do all this stuff. What ends up happening is they sell him into slavery. They get some money for selling their brother. Now, I imagine as he's being carted off into this cart, taken into Egypt, into slavery, he's thinking, wait a minute, this wasn't in my dream. This wasn't part of my destiny. This isn't part of what's supposed to happen. They're supposed to bow to me. But he's going through the process. And he ends up in the palace with Potiphar, and he's a servant. But the story goes that he served well. In fact, he did it so well that Potiphar put him in charge of everything. That he was the best of the best. That he took where he was at and the situation that he was in, and he did it with everything that he had. The only thing off limits was his wife, Potiphar's wife. Well, it's funny because you read in the scriptures that he grew handsome in stature and in looks. Oh, that's interesting. And Potiphar's wife took notice, the only thing that he couldn't have. And so she tried to take advantage of him. And he wouldn't have anything to do with it. And so he ran, and she started this rumor. And Potiphar found out that Joseph tried to take advantage of him. That was the rumor. And so Potiphar took him and threw him into prison. This is going from bad to worse, people. This is Joseph, the dreamer, more than one dream, going from bad to worse. In fact, listen to what it says in Psalms about Joseph. Psalms 105 says, they bruised his feet with shackles and his neck was put in irons until what he foretold came to pass. This is not a good situation. Joseph's in prison. Well, guess what happens when Joseph's in prison? He just has the right mindset. Well, I got to have a purpose here. And it says that he served in prison well. So much so that the prison guard, the guy that was in charge of everything, put Joseph in charge of everything. Said, well, this guy can be trusted. Everything he does prospers. In fact, in Genesis 39:21, it says, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. He found favor. He served his purpose in prison. So much so that he had control of everything. If someone had a problem, they came to Joseph. And Joseph would take care of it. Well, one day, two people get thrown in. There were people that worked under the king. And they have dreams, and they're all down and discouraged and frustrated. And so Joseph says, what's going on? So we had dreams, and we don't know what they mean. And Joseph says, well, tell me your dream. And so they do. And Joseph explains what the dreams mean. One good, one not so good. And it came to pass. And Joseph said, hey, when you get before the king, remind him that I'm here. And the story goes that 2 years later, thanks for remembering. 2 years later, the king had a dream. And nobody could remember. Nobody could interpret. Nobody could tell him what his dream meant. So he got frustrated. And then this guy remembers, hey, there's a guy in prison. I had a dream, and I didn't know what it meant, and he told me what it meant, and it came to pass. And so the king is like, bring him in. So they cleaned him up, brought him in, and the king said, hey, I had this dream. I don't know what it means. So Joseph said, tell me your dream. So Joseph listens to the dream, and he says, here's what it means. There's going to be 7 years of plenty, abundance. And the king was happy to hear that. All right, 7 years. But then there's going to be 7 years of drought and famine. So the king asked, well, what should we do? And Joseph gave him this idea. And the king liked the idea so much that he put Joseph in charge of everything. Second in command, he gave him his ring. He said, whatever you say goes. You get all this stuff, do all this stuff, do exactly as you said. And he did, and Egypt prospered. They go through the drought and the famine, and they have plenty of food and all that stuff. Re-enter Jacob and his brothers. Jacob says, hey, we're starving here. We're going to die. Go down to Egypt and buy us some food. And you know the story. Jacob and his family end up bowing before Joseph, fulfilling his destiny and the dream that he had. Now, there's many of us that are not going to have to be sold into slavery, although you feel like it on Monday, or thrown in prison. But the idea is this. There are a lot of situations and circumstances that don't make sense, that are not fun, they feel like hell. But God will see us through because it's part of the process. And if we will see the situation that we're in as our purpose and serve our purpose well, that we will find favor with God. And it will project us to our destiny. And sometimes you may know what that destiny is, and sometimes you may not. But if we will trust in God and we'll put our faith in Him, He will see us through to the very end. Sometimes we can serve our purpose and wonder if we missed it, or we failed, or things didn't happen the way they were supposed to, or we did things our own way, and we screwed up, and there's a bunch of junk that's going on, and we're in this mess, and we can't get out. Serve where you're at with purpose. Do it with everything that you have. Ask God to come into the picture, because He has not forgotten your destiny. He hasn't finished. Maybe our choices have caused us to take a different route, but our day-to-day life is preparing us for that destiny. And all God is saying is when we mess up and when we do things we know that are not part of God's plan, we just need to get back on track. We need to get right back with God and say, okay, God, I'm sorry. I need to serve with purpose. I need to get through this mess that I'm in, and I need your help. But I'm on board. And we will finish, and we'll finish strong. He created you with the end in mind, and that's your destiny. Y'all are still alive, right? Still breathing? You still have purpose. Let's talk about destiny a little bit. Destiny, unlike purpose, purpose is your day-to-day life. It changes all the time, but it's getting us ready for our destiny. Your destiny is what you were created to do by God. Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. In all things, God works for the good of those that love Him. Well, you think, well, that's for those who love God. That's for Christians. No, God loves everyone equally. And He works for the good of those who love Him. Does He want us in relationship with Him? Absolutely. That's His number one. He wants us in relationship with Him. He wants us to follow Him. But He's willing to say, you know what? I love you so much, I'll give you a choice. Serve, follow me, or not. And a lot of times we choose not to. We choose to do things our own way, in our own time, have our fun, do our stuff. And God is like, I love you. I've given you the choice. With every choice comes a consequence, good or bad. That's true love. True love gives you a choice, and every choice has a consequence. We have to serve those consequences regardless. But God loves us, and He says, all things work to good. All things, God works for the good of those who love Him and have been called according to His purpose. Who's been called according to His purpose? All of us. So God is working for us and with us because He wants to see us succeed. We don't have to do everything perfectly. We just have to invite God to be a part of it. God's design is always good, and it'll always work out if we trust Him. Always. And again, there are situations, there are circumstances, there are tragedies, there are frustrations, there are a lot of things that happen in life. They don't make sense, and we might say, why? Why, God? Why is this happening? But if we will trust God and realize that we serve Him in this time and we serve those around us for for a purpose. It's going to propel us to our destiny. I love the story of David. And if you thought the last story was fast, hold on to your seats. David is just a shepherd boy, one of 7 sons of Jesse. In fact, we don't know much about Jesse. Jesse, we know, this is what we know. I know about Jesse anyway in what I studied. Jesse was the son of Obed. Obed was the son of Boaz. Boaz married Ruth. That's as far back as I can go. I mean, it goes way back. But Jesse had 7 sons, 2 daughters. And it says this, that the prophet was sent to Jesse's house to anoint the next king. There's already a king there. He's ready. He's doing his job, but he's not doing it well. And so God sends the prophet to go and find the new king, and he goes to the house of Jesse, and the 6 sons are standing before him, and he goes, nope, 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 nope. Do you have any more kids? And he goes, yeah, there's a scrawny little one out with the sheep. And he says, go get him. So they run to go get David. David runs back. He's probably all sweaty, and he's been out with the sheep. He can't smell that great. And the prophet looks at him and goes, you're the new king. And he anoints him with oil. Imagine a teenager going, what? I got to get back to the sheep. All right? So they anoint him. He anoints him with oil. He tells him he's going to be the next king. David goes back out to the sheep. In the process, Dad has him go see his son. Why is Dad always having the guy that's called go to the other? Well, anyway. So Dad has him bring some bread and probably some Wisconsin cheese. Because why else would he go with cheese? So he brings his brothers. There just happens to be a giant there, and David's mad. You know, David loves God with all his heart. He never let anything touch the sheep. David looked at Israel as God's sheep, and he looks at this guy, and he goes, what are you? So he kills him. All right, down goes Goliath, the giant. David then goes from shepherd to giant killer, from giant killer into the palace to serve the king and play music when he feels bad. The king gets jealous because he knows David is the next one in line to take over the throne. He starts throwing spears at him. David doesn't like that, so he runs into the wilderness, which he's comfortable with. All right, so he's in the wilderness. A bunch of bandits join him and said that they'll follow him anywhere. They'll do anything. He ends up running from his life, from Saul again, and all this stuff. And then he's probably in the cave thinking, wait a minute, wasn't I anointed to be king? Probably going through this whole thing. He's hiding in caves. Caves can't smell that good either. So all this stuff is going on, and yet in the right time and in the right place and the right position, David is put as king over Israel. And he was a good king. He was a good warrior. He took care of Israel. He served right. But guess what? David made some mistakes. David lost sight of what God had called him to do. He lost sight of the wilderness, and while he was in the palace, he sinned, and then he killed one of his good friends. And well, if you read the story in the Bible, there were consequences to pay for the decisions that he made. But he repented, and he got his life right with God. This is my favorite part of David's life, because in the Bible, in the New Testament, it says that David was a man after God's own heart. See, David wasn't perfect. He's just like you and I. He made a mistake, and he got his eyes off of God, and he made some mistakes, and he had consequences to pay, and they weren't good consequences, you guys. They were horrible. And yet he still stuck through, and he finished. And this is what it says in Acts 13:36. And when David had served God's purpose in his own generation, he fell asleep and was buried with his ancestors, and his body decayed. But not until he had finished his purpose. You're here this morning and you've made mistakes and you're going through consequences, and there's things that are going on in your life that are just ugly. Just come back. Don't try and do it on your own. Don't try and do it by yourself. Don't try and just sit there and go, well, you know what? I made a mistake. It's too late for me. It's never too late. All God wants you to do is come back, and he'll help you through the situations that you're in, and he'll be with you. But God wants you to finish strong. He created you to finish. He created you so that you could fulfill the destiny that only you can do. I can't do what you were called to do, and you can't do what I was called to do. It's part of a plan that God has that he wants you to finish. And what I'm inviting you to this morning is to see that your life has purpose in the day-to-day stuff to help you finish your destiny. One of the clearest clues to your purpose is what or who will you serve. If you have no idea what you're supposed to do in the situation and the place that you're at right now, ask yourself, who or what am I supposed to serve? Because serving is God's heart. Take care of the widows and the orphans, number one. Take care of the people that are around us, your neighbors, the people that you work with. Ask God, who am I supposed to serve today? That'll help project you into your purpose, which will help launch you into your destiny. I have this written in my journal that I look at quite a bit. It says, you can't choose how you will die, but you can choose how you will live. So live it with purpose and on purpose so that you can fulfill your destiny. God is always faithful to his word, and we don't lose our destiny because we make mistakes. It might be a little harder because of the choices that we make, but be sure of this, everything we encounter along the way is to help us fulfill our destiny. Romans 11:29 is a good reminder. For God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. Here's what that means. You were born with certain gifts, talents, and abilities, and you were given a call. And it doesn't matter what you do, God doesn't take that away. They're irrevocable. They don't change. He doesn't change his mind. So if wherever you're at in your relationship with God this morning, whether you're serving him or you're a brand new believer or you're not yet there, all God wants us to do is trust in him. Put our faith in him and allow him to use the things that we're in right now to get us ready for our destiny. He is calling us to himself into a relationship with him. I want to end with this. Imagine, think for a minute with me how different tomorrow will look if we wake up and head into our Monday serving our purpose. Your job and the people that you connect with, the meetings that you're in, the situations you encounter are all part of the plan, and they have purpose in your life. How awesome would that be? I want to end with this next video clip, and I'll come back and say a few words and we'll close. big machine. Machines don't have any spare parts, just what they need. So I figure since I'm here, I'm part of the machine. I have purpose. If you lose your purpose, maybe you're broken. But you know what? God is a God who fixes the broken. He fixes the hurting. And if we'll just come to him and say, God, I'm broken, and I'm hurt, and I'm angry, and I'm frustrated, and I don't understand. It's the first step to being healed. It's the first step to saying, okay, God, I'm ready to serve my purpose. You are here right now as part of the big plan because you have a purpose and a destiny to fulfill. There are no mistakes. There are no accidents. There's no unplanned pregnancies. You were created to finish. You are the plan of God. I want to say that again. You are the plan of God. There is no plan B. You are the plan. Let's bow our heads. Father, I thank you for everyone that's here this morning that needed to hear this message. God, I thank you that you believe in us, that you know where we're at. You know every part, everything that we've done, and you still love us. And you've given us a plan. You've given us purpose to fulfill a destiny. And God, I pray that that would stick in our hearts, that tomorrow, Monday, we would go into our work or into our situation and say, God, what is my purpose today? Thank you for loving us, Jesus. Thank you for giving us your Son, Father. And Jesus, thank you for loving us enough that you would die for us and give us the choice. Everybody has their heads bowed and eyes closed. I want to ask this question. You're here this morning, and you don't know God the way I've been talking about him this morning. You've never asked him to come into your life, to take control, to help you through the process of life. But you'd say, yeah, that's me. And today, I want to surrender to Jesus. I just want to give him my life. If you're here this morning, you'd say, you know what, I want to do that. Would you just raise your hand? We just want to pray with you. Just raise your hand. You just say, you know what, I just want God. I just want you in my life to help me through, to serve my purpose. Thank you for that hand. Thank you in the back. Thank you. Thank you. You can lower those hands. Thank you. Something that we do on a weekly basis here. Those of you that just raised your hand, would you just put that hand over your heart? And we just say something like this. Father, thank you for sending your Son to die for my sins. I ask you to forgive me, to come into my life, to set me free. Help me to live for you all the rest of the days of my life. Amen. Amen. Before you leave this morning, we have information for you. If you'd fill out that information on the back of your bulletin, or you can go to our Welcome Center. We'd just like to give you some information to take home and go through the process. If you just stand with me, I'd like to close in prayer and just pray over you. Leave here this morning knowing that you have a purpose to fulfill today and tomorrow that will lead you to your destiny. Father, I pray your covering over each one. I ask God that as we leave here today and we celebrate with our moms, that God, you would help us to recognize that you are in control, but God, that you have given us things to do in this life to fulfill, to bring us to that conclusion. God, I pray that you would give us your strength and your power, that we would rely on you in the everyday stuff to not only get us through, but God, to serve well. So in the end, it will be said of us that when we had served God's purpose, we fell asleep and went home to be with you. God, I pray you would protect each one today, protect each one this week, and God, may we serve you well. In Jesus' name, amen.